The Closing Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close, starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick alongside Alix Steel, here to take you to the closing bells. It's our global simulcast. Scarlet Fu joining us in the television studio. Massar and Tim Stenovec in the radio booth as we welcome our audiences across all of our platforms, including that partnership with YouTube. Massar, bringing across the screen another day of gains here for major equity indices here. Not the repositioning of last week, but a repositioning, apparently, around the U.S. election.
Yeah, really fascinating, right? First of all, I would say a lot of bouncing around on the equity side of things. We're definitely off our highs of this session. But yeah, we've been focused so much in terms of what's going on at the RNC and just coming off the weekend and what's to come in this presidential politics and political election. But having said that, let's not forget earnings are underway. And I'm looking at the KBW Bank Index, folks, that really is outperforming today, Tim, up about 1.6%. Goldman up even more than that.
Okay, you're watching the banks. I'm watching the return of the Trump trade because we got private prisons higher, we got firearm-related companies higher, we got green energy companies and solar companies lower, we got Bitcoin higher by 5.5%. So it seems to be, like you said, Romaine, a rethink of politically what could happen in November.
As much as there's a political shift taking place, there are some things that have carried over from last week. After the June CPI report last Thursday, the Russell 2000 has consistently outperformed, up more than 6.5%. S&P little change, and the Mag 7 down about 4%. And that's continuing to be the case today.
Right. Trump trade or Fed trade or inflation trade, right?
Yeah. And then also sort of, do you buy into it or do you fade it? I mean, there was a lot of research notes out talking about the Russell and that sustainability of that rally in question.
All right. Well, at least for this day here, you are seeing that outperformance. Let's walk you through the numbers with an S&P 500. Looks like it's up on the day by roughly about 18 points or about 0.3%, 56.32 and change here. So not a record high for the S&P. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up about 0.5%. I believe that is a record high for the Dow, up about 200 points back to 40,212. The Nasdaq Composite up about 74 points or 0.4%. But let's take a look at the Russell, a 1.8% gain on the day, fourth straight day that we've seen it outperform the S&P and the Nasdaq. That's the first time that's happened going back to at least late March.
All right, back to the S&P 500, guys. Almost an even split, but a little bit more to the upside. 278 names actually gaining some ground today. 225, Scarlet, to the downside.
And a pretty even split when you look at the sectors in the S&P 500. It's rare that you don't see communication services or tech or consumer discretionary at either end of the barbell among the best performers or the worst performers. Instead, you have energy, financials, and industrials leading gains. And the laggards here are really your defensive sectors. Utilities down by more than 2 1/3%. Consumer staples and healthcare, traditional defensive groups, also lower by about 0.4%.
All right, guys, to the individual gainers we go. And what's interesting is while some people are saying it's all about small caps, diversification, branching out, a lot of the Mag 7 actually outperformed at least earlier in the session. I'm looking at shares of Alphabet at its highs up 1.7%, finishing the day with a gain of about 0.8%. This is following some reports that the Google parent is in talks to buy the cybersecurity startup Wiz for as much as $23 billion. This is according to Person Familiar, based on Bloomberg reporting. So we keep an eye on that one. Apple outperforming again, up almost 3% at its highs, finishing the day with a gain of about 1.7%, closing at a record today. The tech giant named a top pick over at Morgan Stanley. The broker seeing the launch of the company's AI platform triggering a record rush among users to upgrade their smartphones, tablets, and computers. So there's an outperformer. Netflix up 3% at its highs, finishing the day with a 1.4% gain. This is after having its price target raised to $780 a share from $700 by Morgan Stanley. The analysts there are expecting strong second quarter results and 2025 growth. Netflix, don't forget, reporting on Wednesday after the close, the stock closing at $656 and change. And then, as we mentioned, the Trump trade today, had to mention Trump Media and Technology Group. DJT, of course, is the ticker. That went up about 31% in today's session, so soaring in today's trade, Tim.
Okay, you got the gainers. I got the decliners. Kind of a retail theme a little bit. Starting with Macy's, shares falling close to 12%. This after the company ended discussions with two investors to buy out the chain, pledging to execute a turnaround plan on its own. Worst intraday performance since March of 2020, but shares did finish off their lows. The company shares fell after they said a buyout offer from Arkhouse and Brigade wasn't a, quote, actionable proposal because it doesn't have sufficient financing, the company said in a statement earlier today. Also, I talked a little bit about the Trump trade. Shares of solar and green energy companies falling today. Among those, Sunrun sells, installs battery and solar panels on roofs, fell 9% today. We did see other companies move higher, private prison operators, firearm-related companies among the stocks rallying. The other side, of course, being the renewable and greens. And then ADRs of Burberry Group. Keeping an eye on those, Alex. Shares cratered after the company said it replaced its CEO. It issued a profit warning after a downturn in the luxury industry has foiled the company's efforts to challenge high-end labels such as Chanel, Louis Vuitton, and others. ADRs are at their lowest since 2010. Worst day going back to March of 2020. Burberry announced that Jonathan Ackroyd is departing after less than 2.5 years. He's being replaced by Joshua Schulman, a former CEO of Michael Kors, Coach, and Jimmy Choo. They also suspended their dividend, said the slowdown in luxury sector sales has persisted into July. They've had 5 CEOs in a decade.
Wow. And I also don't want to pay $20,000 for a raincoat. Anyway.
Is that how much they cost?
No, I'm just, it's hyperbole, Tim. It's just the idea.
Sounds high.
I mean, maybe some raincoats. Okay, I'm taking a look at the bond market here. It's been quite an interesting day. So the back end really selling off. So that curve is steeper, but it's steeper because the back end is selling off. The last 2 days we saw a steeper curve because the front end you saw a lot of buying and those yields coming down on the 2-year. So just a change of how we're getting this steepener, and that's also quite significant in terms of what it means. You're looking at the 30-year also above the 2-year for the first time this year, and that 210 spread is now the tightest that we've seen since January of this year as well, guys.
Absolutely here. And we talk about this idea of all the sort of moves that we saw in the cross-asset space, whether it was the weakening of the peso, strengthening of the dollar, and of course the big moves that we saw in the treasury space. And I guess at some point we're going to talk about what's happened in crypto. But something I do want to talk about is a story that actually caught my eye and actually involves writing checks. I don't know, Carol, you still write checks probably in the grocery store or something, but I'm learning that Target
feels judgy, but yes, today, I do occasionally.
Starting today, if you go to Target, Carol, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. They're actually doing away with taking paper checks. You have to basically use your debit card or just cash.
It's really kind of amazing. I know, all right, we are very much a digital society. Have to remind myself that there is still cash that backs all of those digital moves that we make. But it is interesting, this era, like, right? How many times did we used to over the years, maybe, I don't know, like, buy those boxes of checks. You needed checks. People wanted a check. It's not the way anymore.
It may not be the way at a Target or a supermarket, but I mean, if you have to pay parking tickets, and I speak from personal experience here, and the processing service charges you like 20% fees, then you're going to write a check. I'll gladly pay for the forever stamp at that point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, but
I'm sorry, Scarlett. Can you tell us a little bit more about these parking tickets?
Hey, sometimes it happens, guys. Okay.
Have you been clamped yet?
Do you guys remember when you were kids, though, and your parents would, part of the rite of passage of growing older is getting that checking account, and your parents would make you balance the checkbook? Or was this just me?
No. I had the little. I saved my passbook, or I just my mother saved it.
Isn't that that's an important part of financial independence, or like learning to be financially independent? And I don't know, with these days, you just go and put your phone on a thing and. Is
financial literacy a thing? Is it a priority right now? I don't know.
Yeah,
it needs to be.
It's an entirely different discussion.
Presumably, you can still balance your budget without your checkbook. You can do it in other ways, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, and it gets to the idea too, though. I mean, like, there's a whole generation. I think Tim was getting to it that never has known paper checks or anything like that. I've got a box of paper checks that I probably write 3 a year, maybe, if at most. And I guess kids are just more comfortable with swiping their phones and doing everything else. I know the children of my household.
Where you still need to write checks?
Where?
If your kid goes to public school and there's a trip, you need to write a check because the teachers don't want to handle cash because of.
Untrue. I Venmo my teachers for my daughter.
For real?
Yeah, I live in Park Slope. We're hip, man.
I don't know. In Westchester, they made us write checks.
Scarlett, is there something about a parking ticket you want to tell us, or like?
I write a lot of checks, guys.
Okay.
Oh my God!
I'm not like the dude in The Big Lebowski where I'm writing like 69 cents for a gallon of milk, but I'm writing checks.
I feel like often there's a mailroom near where we sit, and there's oftentimes letters from Scarlett in the mailroom.
Yeah, you spied my letter to.
Yeah, are those all just parking? Is that just parking tickets, right?
All right. I guess we're going to wrap on that one. We all sound kind of old something. I don't know. All right. Anyway, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. Folks, we will see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.